Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion on the Tangled States storyline as we take a look at Web Warriors number 8. Now, last time on Web Warriors! Put simply, things started getting a little crazy. So, after the events of Electroverse, the Web of Life and Destiny has still showcased some damage from what had from Karn being separated from it, and the Electro's messing with it. While we have seen some minor ways the web's been affected, like with Karn losing the strand that corresponded to Earth 803, or one of the strands being set on fire when a bedlam was going on in the world it corresponded to, we're now starting to see some bigger ramifications from seeing the web damaged. Specifically, worlds are beginning to bleed into one another, and the first time we see this is with Hobie Brown, aka Spider-Punk, as he's in the middle of a fight between his spider army and the armed guards of Adrian Toombs. Well, he ends up coming face to face with Spider-Ham 2099, who is a 2099 version of the Spider-Ham that we know. And following behind him is an invading force of Duckbots led by Dr. Doom 2099, the Dr. Doom of Spider-Ham 2099's world. Of course, he went straight to the Web Warriors with this, and sure enough, the Web Warriors responded, and after some good bit of cartoon shenanigans from Ham, they were able to fend off the Duckbots, but it's clear that the problem is a lot bigger than anyone anticipated, because shortly after the Duckbots were sent back to their universe, the Web Warriors wound up finding themselves in the middle of another altercation, specifically between the Megamorph versions of Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus. And for those of you who haven't read Megamorphs, like myself, it's a world where superheroes and supervillains ride around in giant robots. Which is what's going on now. And that's where this issue picks up, as, well, yeah, the robots are kind of going nuts on each other. As such, while the Web Warriors have absolutely no idea what's going on or how to deal with this, they do come up with an obvious solution. Attack the giant robot that doesn't look like Spider-Man. And so, sure enough, the various Spideys end up ganging up on the Doc Ock robot, and, well, no matter the universe, Doc Ock recognizes Spider-Man when he sees him, and so the instant he sees the other Spideys, he starts trying to whap them away. In the meantime, back with Loom World, we see that another Doc Ock, specifically Octavia Otto, has continued her work studying the Great Web, and we see that, unfortunately, Karn has lost contact with the team, which even Octavia mentions asks how often this happens, and Karn admits that it happens quite a bit, especially when catastrophes are involved. I kind of like it when they become self-aware like that. My point is this: they have lost contact with the team, and as Octavia continues studying the web, she begins realizing something about it. It ain't doing so well. Now, while they kind of retread the whole worlds are starting to bleed into one another thing, which again Karn kind of noticed before when Hobie's world and Spider-Ham 2099's world were kind of crossing over into one another. As Octavia begins studying the web, she quickly realizes just the extent of the damage, and she realizes the web is hurting, and that, well, she thinks she might be able to have a solution. As they're able to tell, since the strands are starting to come tangled up in one another, she begins to wonder if that's the reason why they can't find Earth 803. Because if strands of the web are getting tangled up, not only would that mean that some worlds are starting to bleed into one another, but that some might become lost in it. Kind of like if you had a big ball of yarn. You can find a way to untangle it, so to speak, if you can find a loose strand, but a good chunk of the yarn is going to be lost in the large ball. You're not going to see every little bit of it. You're not going to see every little bit of it until you start untangling that. And so Octavia thinks that maybe if they can they can start untangling the web and start pulling at strands, then maybe they'll be able to find Earth 803 and they'll be able to find Earth 803, so to speak. In the meantime, that also means they might be able to get back in contact with the team. And speaking of said team, they're not doing so well with the fight against Megamorph Doc Ock, who unfortunately is not taking any damage from their attacks. Which even Anya admits that the only thing that seems to be hurting the only thing that seems to be hurting either the Megamorph Spidey or Megamorph Doc Ock are each other, since they're utilizing similar robots. However, as such, in the midst of all this, Megamorph Spidey does realize, oh hey, there are other spider people here, and tells them that maybe they should that he can handle Doc Ock himself, and that they should try prioritizing helping civilians. Which I do kind of like that his priorities are still on that. And I'm only mentioning that because later in the story, Megamorph Doc Ock starts showcasing some toy tendencies, because Megamorphs was a tie-in to a toy line which, again, like I said, involved the superheroes getting giant robots. And Doc Ock mentions that he wants to look for accessories. So I do kind of like that even in the midst of all this, Spider-Man still kind of has his head in the game and says, I'm the only one that can deal with this guy. Focus on making sure that nobody gets hurt focus on making sure nobody gets caught in the crossfire, which the Spideys are willing to do, but even they realize that that Megamorph, Spidey, and Doc Ock, if their battle is left unchecked, could result in a good chunk of Hobie's New York getting destroyed. So, yeah, they really have no idea what to do. In the meantime, we actually cut back to Earth 803, and we see that Billy and Mayday have been busy, so to speak. Basically, Mayday has been at work making tiny little finger sandwiches for the Electros because, well, they've been trapped in the Faraday cage in Battery Park for days now, and, well, they're not going to be cruel. Mayday wants to make sure they're at least fed so they don't starve to death in there. So she spent like a good few hours making hundreds of finger sandwiches that she thinks will be small enough to fit through the web. In the meantime, Billy has actually been, the whole time that the pair have been trapped here, sending out messages through Pavitter's communications device that he had built when the Web Warriors retreated to this world back during Electroverse. Basically, this is just like standard protocol. Every day he'll send out a message on the same frequency, at the same time, and basically it's the same message. This is Billy Braddock, Spider-Man. Although, I mean, he should be calling himself Spider-UK, but that's a nitpick. Basically, he's just sending out the message, this is Billy Braddock, Spider-Man, we're on Earth, me and Mayday are on Earth 803, please respond, and so on and so forth. And he just does that for the same amount of time every day until he hopes that someone will respond. And so, as Mayday goes off to hopefully deliver the sandwiches to the Electros, Billy starts getting to work sending out that message. And coinky-dink of all coinky-dinks, this is when Octavia starts getting ready to untangle the web. As after seeing how the extent of the damage on her machines, she decides that she's going to manually untangle it. And so, with Karn's permission, she manages to utilize the devices to hack into his, well, legs, so to speak, and starts manually controlling them. And sure enough, she does manage to find the strands of the web that are all tangled up, and she begins trying to unravel it. Unfortunately, she unraveled it a little too hard, because as that's going on, back on Hobie's world, as Megamorph Doc Ock starts getting the upper hand in his battle with Megamorph Spider-Man, well, the Web Warriors look to the sky and see that the giant rip that Spider-Ham 2099 came through with Dr. Doom and his Duckbots. It's starting to get closer, and they realize maybe we should start focusing more on that thing right now. But unfortunately, too little, too late. When Octavia manages to untangle the strands and get Karn back in contact with Earth 803, well, the rip in time and space manages to hit the Web Warriors and causes them all to go flying across the multiverse. And that's not an exaggeration, because as a result of this, the Web Warriors all get separated. As on one world, specifically, I'm just going to say Spider-Ham's world, Spider-Gwen, and as we learn in the next issue, Spider-Ham 2099 get blasted there, and sadly, so too does Megamorph Dr. Octopus. Then, in the meantime, Spider-Man Noir, Pavitr Prabhakar, and the original Spider-Ham have been jettisoned straight to Earth 90214, aka the Marvel Noir universe. And, well, when they arrive, Pavitr immediately begins asking questions, because upon the trio of Spideys waking up, Pavitr sees something that that shouldn't be there. A neon sign. And so once Pavitr sees this, Spider-Man Noir comes clean that things have been going a little wonky on his world, and that while he knows he probably could have told the Web Warriors, he wanted to investigate it proper. But now he thinks he might have a lead. And, well, we soon see what that lead is, as we see what the neon sign is that they're looking at. A sign for Oscorp. But, of course, going back to another team of Spideys, which, yeah, you can tell I'm jumping around quite a bit here. What Octavia did was successful, and Karn has now reestablished contact with Earth 803, and so Billy, of course, just starts getting them up to speed, letting them know that he and Mayday have been trying to make sure the Electros have been contained, but maybe they should get maybe they can set up a plan to get the Electros out of the Faraday cage and transfer them back to their worlds. Although, as this happens, happens, he ends up hearing a blast from down the street, and when Billy goes to look out the window and see what the problems are, well, he soon says that maybe they should send the entire team to this world. As we see Mayday swinging down the street, the sandwiches just dropped on the ground as the Electros start making their way out of Battery Park, having now breached the cage. So, alright, that was our plot summary, and if you can't tell, things are starting to get a little... This is starting to become a clusterfuck of a storyline, and it's at this point that I'm probably just going to mention one of the key flaws with Tangled States. Too much shit goes on here, and you can see that as early as this issue. Now, the last issue, for the most part, was focused on what it was trying to do. Like, yeah, it felt insane, but it was admittedly kind of fun. Because you weren't thrown too much shit all at once. Because the extent of the problem that you were shown last issue was that Hobie's world was starting to clash with Spider-Ham 2099's world. And as a result, the primary problem in that issue was dealing with Dr. Doom 2099 and his army of Duckbots. So basically, once that problem was taken care of, you could set your primary focus to the rip in time and space and figuring out what's it doing here and how can we get it to go away. So things didn't feel too hectic. It's just that things did not feel too hectic last issue, and as a result, it allows us to kind of take one problem at a time. To first deal with the immediate threat of the supervillain, then focus on how he got here. But of course, last issue also ended with a new threat immediately showing up in the form of Megamorph Spider-Man and Megamorph's Dr. Octopus. As a result of that, which did a good job, in my opinion, showcasing that this was this was actually a bigger problem than we were led to believe. But this issue is where things start really getting confusing because, well, because for the most part, from the beginning of this comic, we have three things going on. First is the stuff in Hobie's universe, and as the Web Warriors are trying to deal with the giant robot versions of Spider-Man and Doc Ock, and trying to help the big robot Spider-Man fight his supervillain, while also making sure that that the damage is as minimal as possible between their battle. But then on top of that, we go back to Loom World as Octavia Otto starts diagnosing what's wrong with the Web of Life and Destiny, and that it might need a doctor, so to speak, to try and fix it. But then we also have Billy and Mayday. Now, on the surface, this stuff doesn't feel too bad, because for the most part, it feels like it can be, because these things can be easily kept track of, because you can easily group the stuff with Octavia and the Web Warriors as part of the same problem, since you can tell that the bleeding over of worlds is a consequence of what's going on with the Web of Life and Destiny. Same goes for Billy and Mayday. But the thing is with Billy and Mayday, that's an entirely different set of problems. It's asymptomatic of the bigger problem with the Web of Life and Destiny, but the major problem that we started the issue with was the giant robots in Hobie's universe. So of course that should be where we keep our attention on. And so the stuff with Mayday and Billy kind of needs to be on the sidelines, which admittedly it is up until the end of the comic, because from them, nothing too big is happening. They're just making sandwiches while Billy keeps trying to contact the team. So that doesn't feel too distracting. It's just something that's going on in the background to help showcase that they're still dealing with this, and there's nothing too big or too fancy to keep track of. It's not until the Octavia actually pulls the strands of the Web of Life apart from each other that things start getting crazy and hectic. Things haven't gotten too bad, but it's here where things all start happening at once, and what was once something that you could easily keep track of begins to get very confusing. And you see it very early on, and you can start seeing that the strands of the story are starting to get spread a little too thin. We don't see it immediately, but it's at this point where you can start seeing that maybe the attention should be a lot smaller. And well, it all starts when the Web Warriors get split. You know the phrase "don't split the party" in D&D? Well, that kind of also applies to team books, and we can see that here because at this point the Web Warriors are now scattered across 4 universes. We got Anya Corazon, Spider-Punk, Hold on one second. Sorry about that. Had to check something. But yeah, we got Anya Corazon, Lady Spider, and Hobie Brown stuck on Hobie's universe. We've got Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Man India, and Spider-Ham stuck in the Marvel Noir universe. We've got Spider-Gwen, Spider-Ham 2099, and Megamorph's Doc Ock trapped in the Cartoon Animals universe, i.e. Spider-Ham's universe. And then you got Billy and Mayday on Earth 803 as they're dealing with the Electros. All of them are dealing with problems now. And so as a result, things are starting to get very confusing. You got like in going to Hobie's universe, you got Anya, May, Hobie, and Megamorph Spider-Man immediately trying to realize what was that thing coming at us, where'd the team go, and so on and so forth. As while the evil man and the giant robot is gone, they still have to wonder where they are. In the Marvel Noir universe, we start kind of getting follow up to what's going on with Spider-Man Noir, as we see that there may be someone that they may need to talk to regarding modern technology now being in the 1930s in that universe, i.e. with Oscorp. So that's another plot line you got to keep track of. You got Spider-Ham's universe with Spider-Gwen, Spider-Ham 2099, and Megamorph's Doc Ock. And, well, Megamorph's Doc Ock is, of course, asking questions what's going on, and you got to keep in mind he's a psychopath and a giant robot, so that's not exactly something you need to keep track of. And then you got Mayday and Billy, as they now have to deal with the Electros that they all trapped not just one storyline ago, now suddenly getting free and now getting ready to start causing mayhem across 1890s New York. It's again, this is the start of where things start getting crazy. And I don't mean crazy in the fun way like we saw in the last issue. Crazy as in you now got to keep track of 4 separate storylines all happening together and all apparently tied together because of the web being all screwy. And as a result, this is where things start getting confusing. And before you start mentioning how in Electroverse we had 2 separate storylines going on there, at the very least those 2 storylines were still tied together by one simple thing. The Electros. Yes, they were, Gwen and Ben were off doing their own thing while the Web Warriors are off here doing other things, but they were all working towards the same goal. And while one team could usually be doing like passive stuff, like when the Web Warriors were investigating Earth 803 and tracked down the Black Cat of that world to figure out how she was tied to the Electros, on the other side we got plot progression with Gwen and Ben as they freed the Doc Ocks and wound up essentially wound up crippling the Electroverse as they took away their system for mapping out universes. So there was at least something going on there. They could be the plot points didn't feel too confusing because for the one, there were only 2 of them, and 2, they were both working towards the same goal and kind of interwove with one another. Especially near the end when Billy was able to reestablish contact with Gwen and they were able to trade notes and talk about what their plans were. Especially when Gwen took advantage of that and managed to bring the battery to Earth 803 so he could be trapped alongside the Electros. So it could be a little it risked being a little confusing, but for the most part, things were still mostly on track. Yeah, you had 2 separate things going on at the same time, but they were still very much involved with one another, and nothing really felt like that it didn't really feel like your focus was spread too thin. But here, you start to see that happening as the Web Warriors are split off across. And as a result, because the Web Warriors are spread out into too many places, it kind of starts getting confusing because now you got to focus on all these different problems. And yes, you can make the argument that all these plot lines are tied together because they're all symptomatic of what's going on with the Great Web, but the problem is that the Great Web starts becoming less of an issue when you have to deal with all this other shit. Yeah, the Great Web being damaged is what's causing all of this. But these are now problems that the Spideys have to deal with before dealing with that, because these are now immediate problems. You got Spider-Man Noir now having to going after whoever's behind the Oscorp logo. I'm not going to say who it is because that's kind of a spoiler, but you can probably guess based on when I'm talking and if you've read Spider-Man Noir books. And then likewise, you got the Web Warriors in Hobie's universe trying to figure out what happened to them. We got to take care of that. You got Gwen dealing with the giant robot Doc Ock, and then again, we got Billy and Mayday with the Electros. There's too many immediate threats going on that you have to focus on, and as a result, it gets confusing and disorienting when you have to try and figure out what should be the main focus of the story. What's happening? What's going on? Again, you can make the argument that the Great Web should be the big focus, but when you have all these little things going on in the background, as a result, it gets confusing and starts becoming disorienting, and it's not good. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. It can be very confusing, and as a result of this, what started as an awesome storyline that made me want to see what was going on starts little by little becoming confusing and ultimately a little off-putting. So I'm not going to claim the issue is bad by any means, because there is still some cool stuff. For the first half, I think it's awesome seeing the Web Warriors trying to help fight off the Megamorph Doc Ock, so which, again, I do like, and what I do still, and again, I do like that Megamorph Spider-Man is still keeping his eyes on the prize and prioritizing helping people versus, advertising the giant robots, though he does ask the Web Warriors, hey, do you guys have any Megamorphs? Can you pull them out now? When he starts losing the fight. And then, likewise, again, for the first half of the story, things still moved at a grand pace as everything that was going on there didn't feel too distracting from one another. It's just during the second half when you can start to see things getting spread a little too thin, and as a result, it starts to showcasing that things are going to get a lot more confusing before they start making sense. So, I guess I can just say the issue is all right-ish. All right-ish. Half is fine. The other half starts showing what's going to happen in the rest of the story. So, yeah, that's about it. I can't really think of anything else. I'll think of more stuff when we look at more issues. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll hopefully see you on Saturday as we take a look at issue 9 and start seeing just if we can find a way to tie up all this clusterfuck of storylines. So until then, hope you have a good day. I'm once again Samuel Johnson, and I'll hopefully see you on Thursday. Take care.